My name is Nina Hayes, and I'm 29 years old. 6 months ago, I sat in an HR conference room at the tech company where I work, watching my former best friend, Vanessa Cole, try to explain to our director why she had been using company messaging systems to share my private photos and personal information with our entire department. Her face was pale, her hands were shaking, and the confident, charming persona she had maintained for 3 years was crumbling as HR presented screenshots of messages where she had mocked me, spread rumors about me, and systematically turned our colleagues against me while pretending to be my closest friend. What she didn't know was that I had spent the past 2 months quietly documenting every loan she never repaid, every idea she stole, every lie she told, and every manipulative tactic she used to isolate me while building her own reputation on my trust. The look on her face when she realized I had evidence of everything and that her career was over was the most vindicating moment of my life. If you're watching this story unfold, drop a comment about where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button, because what happened next proved that sometimes the most dangerous enemies are the ones who call themselves your friends while quietly destroying you. But to understand how I got to that moment, sitting in an HR office watching my supposed best friend's lies exposed, I need to take you back 3 years and show you how someone I trusted completely had been systematically betraying me while I defended her to everyone who tried to warn me. I started working at Tech Vision Solutions in Denver 3 years ago as a product manager. The company was a mid-sized software company specializing in project management tools for businesses with about 200 employees and annual revenues around $50 million. I was 26 when I joined, excited about the opportunity and eager to build my career in tech. Vanessa Cole started at Tech Vision about 2 weeks after me, also as a product manager in the same department. She was 28, outgoing and friendly, with an easy charm that made people like her immediately. During my second week, she approached me in the break room. "You're Nina, right?" she said with a warm smile. "I'm Vanessa. We're both new to the product team. We should stick together and help each other navigate this place." I was grateful for the friendly overture. Starting a new job can be isolating, and having someone who seemed genuinely interested in building a friendship made the transition much easier. Over the next few months, Vanessa and I became close. We had lunch together most days, grabbed drinks after work, and talked frequently about our projects, our careers, and our personal lives. She seemed genuinely supportive and interested in my life. She asked about my family, my relationships, my goals. She commiserated when I had difficult days and celebrated when things went well. "I'm so glad we found each other," Vanessa told me about 3 months into our friendship. "It's hard to find people you can really trust and be yourself with. I feel like we're going to be friends for life." I felt the same way. Vanessa seemed like the kind of friend everyone hopes to find. Supportive, fun, trustworthy, always there when you needed her. But looking back now, I can see warning signs that I completely missed at the time. Small things that didn't quite add up, but that I dismissed because I wanted to believe our friendship was genuine. The first incident happened about 4 months after we met. Vanessa mentioned she was having trouble making rent because an unexpected car repair had wiped out her savings. She asked if I could loan her $800 to help her cover the shortfall. "I'll pay you back on my next paycheck, I promise," she said. "I just don't want to ask my family for money. They already think I'm irresponsible with finances." I loaned her the money without hesitation. We were friends, and friends help each other. But when her next paycheck came, there was no mention of repayment. When I gently brought it up, Vanessa looked embarrassed. "Oh God, Nina, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot. I had to pay a deposit on a new apartment and it slipped my mind. I'll get you the money next week for sure." But next week came and went with no repayment. And the week after that. Eventually, I stopped bringing it up because I felt awkward asking repeatedly. And Vanessa seemed to conveniently forget every time I hinted about it. The pattern repeated several more times over the following year. Vanessa would have some financial emergency, would ask to borrow money ranging from $300 to $1,200, would promise to pay me back quickly, and then would never actually repay the loan. When I would bring it up, she would apologize profusely and promise to pay me back soon, but it never happened. By the time I finally stopped loaning her money, Vanessa owed me approximately $4,200. That was money I could have used for my own expenses or savings, but instead it had disappeared into Vanessa's spending habits while she continued buying expensive clothes and going on trips she apparently couldn't afford. But the money wasn't the worst part. The worst part was how Vanessa systematically took credit for my ideas while positioning herself as more innovative and capable than me. It started small. I would mention an idea for a product feature during one of our lunch conversations, and a few days later, Vanessa would present that same idea in a team meeting as if she had thought of it. When I would point this out gently, she would claim she didn't remember me mentioning it, or would say we had developed the idea together through our discussions. "You know how we brainstorm together all the time," she would say with a smile. "Ideas just flow when we talk." I honestly can't remember who said what first. We're such a good team. It was subtle enough that I couldn't prove she was deliberately stealing my ideas, and confronting her directly felt petty and paranoid. So I let it go, telling myself that maybe we really were just thinking along similar lines. But the pattern continued and escalated. I would spend days developing a comprehensive product strategy, would discuss aspects of it with Vanessa to get her feedback, and then would watch her present similar concepts in meetings with our manager before I had a chance to present my work. Our manager, a guy named Tom Davidson, started making comments about Vanessa being really innovative and ahead of the curve on product thinking. Meanwhile, I was seen as competent but not particularly creative, even though I was actually the one generating the ideas Vanessa was taking credit for. I started to pull back on how much I shared with Vanessa, but by then our friendship was so established that it felt awkward to suddenly become secretive. And Vanessa was good at making me feel guilty if I didn't share things with her. "Are you mad at me about something?" she would ask if I was less forthcoming about my work. "I feel like you're pulling away and I don't know what I did. I thought we were best friends." So I would reassure her that everything was fine and continue sharing because I didn't want to lose the friendship and because I still believed, despite the evidence, that Vanessa was fundamentally a good person who valued our relationship. The other thing I missed, or chose not to see, was how Vanessa subtly undermined me with our colleagues while building herself up. She would make comments in group settings that seemed supportive on the surface, but actually cast me in a negative light. Things like "Nina is so dedicated, she works all weekend on projects," said in a tone that suggested I was inefficient rather than hardworking, or "Nina is really detail-oriented, sometimes to a fault," which implied I was too focused on minor issues rather than seeing the big picture. She would also share things I told her in confidence, always framing it as concern for me rather than gossip. I learned later that Vanessa had told multiple colleagues about my relationship problems, my family issues, and my insecurities, all while claiming she was worried about Nina and hoping we could support her. But at the time, I just saw Vanessa as my best friend, who I could confide in about anything. I trusted her completely with information I wouldn't have shared with anyone else, and she was using that trust to turn people against me. The relationship dynamics became even more complicated about 18 months into our friendship when I started dating someone I met through a mutual friend. His name was Justin Wright, and we dated for about 8 months. The relationship was good at first, but eventually fell apart because Justin wasn't ready for the level of commitment I wanted. We broke up amicably, stayed friendly, and I moved on. Throughout my relationship with Justin, Vanessa had been supportive and interested, asking about how things were going and listening to me talk about the relationship. After the breakup, she was sympathetic and helpful, telling me I deserved better and that Justin hadn't been good enough for me. What I didn't know was that Vanessa had stayed in contact with Justin after we broke up, and about 4 months after my breakup, they started dating. Secretly. I found out about their relationship 6 months later, not from Vanessa, but from a mutual acquaintance who mentioned seeing them together at a restaurant. When I asked Vanessa about it directly, she admitted they had been dating, but claimed it had just happened recently, and she hadn't told me because she didn't want to hurt my feelings. "I know it's awkward," Vanessa said. looking genuinely apologetic. But Justin and I just clicked. I promise we didn't do anything while you were together, and I wouldn't have pursued it if I thought it would damage our friendship. You're so important to me. I was hurt and uncomfortable, but Vanessa was my best friend, and she seemed sincere about not wanting to hurt me. And Justin and I had been broken up for months. So technically, she hadn't done anything wrong. I told her I was fine with it and tried to be supportive of their relationship, even though it felt strange. But what I later discovered was that Vanessa had been pursuing Justin while we were still together, that she had deliberately stayed in contact with him after our breakup with the intention of dating him, and that she had spent months discussing my relationship with Justin in ways that undermined me and made me look bad. She had told Justin that I was clingy and demanding, that I was too focused on marriage and commitment, and that I was difficult to deal with emotionally. She had positioned herself as the understanding friend who really got him while making me look like the problematic ex. But I didn't know any of this at the time. I just knew that my best friend was now dating my ex, and I was trying to be mature and supportive about it, even though it made me deeply uncomfortable. The situation took a much darker turn about 2 years into my friendship with Vanessa. By this point, I had started to notice that my relationships with other colleagues seemed strained. People who had been friendly when I started at TechVision were now distant or occasionally dismissive. I was being excluded from social events and informal gatherings that I used to be invited to. When I mentioned this to Vanessa, she was sympathetic. "I've noticed that too," she said with concern. "I don't know what's going on. Maybe some people are just cliquey, and it's not about you personally. You still have me, though. I'm always here for you." What I didn't realize was that Vanessa was the reason my colleagues were treating me differently. She had been systematically spreading rumors about me, sharing my private information, and painting me as dramatic, unreliable, and difficult to work with. She had told people that I was jealous of her relationship with Justin, that I was unstable and emotional about work setbacks, that I had complained constantly about the company, and various other lies designed to make me look unprofessional and problematic. And she did all of this while maintaining the facade of being my best friend and biggest supporter. To my face, she was kind and encouraging. Behind my back, she was destroying my reputation and my relationships with colleagues. The turning point came about 9 months ago when something happened that finally made me see Vanessa clearly. I had been working on a major product launch for one of our biggest clients, a project that represented probably the most important work of my career at TechVision. I had spent months developing the strategy, coordinating with multiple teams, and managing every aspect of the launch. The project was complex and high visibility, and I knew it could be career-defining if I executed it successfully. Throughout the project, Vanessa had been asking detailed questions about my approach, my timeline, my challenges. I thought she was just being a supportive friend, interested in what I was working on and wanting to help me think through problems. But about 2 weeks before the launch, Vanessa scheduled a meeting with Tom Davidson, our manager, and presented what she called a comprehensive product strategy that was remarkably similar to the launch plan I had been developing for months. She presented it as her own innovative thinking about how we should approach major product launches using concepts and frameworks that I had spent months creating. Tom was impressed. He praised Vanessa's strategic thinking and said this was exactly the kind of innovative approach the company needed. He asked her to present her strategy at an upcoming executive team meeting. I found out about this from a colleague who mentioned how impressive Vanessa's presentation to Tom had been. When I asked Vanessa about it, she was casual and dismissive. "Oh, I just put together some thoughts about product launch strategies," she said. Tom seemed interested, so I shared them. It wasn't a big deal. "But those are the concepts I've been working on for my launch project," I protested. "We've talked about this strategy extensively. You know that's my work." Vanessa looked at me with an expression of surprise and concern. "Nina, we've had lots of conversations about product strategy. I don't think you can claim ownership of general concepts about how to approach launches. These are ideas I developed based on my own experience and thinking." "That's not true," I said, my frustration evident. You asked me specific questions about my project. I explained my approach in detail, and now you're presenting it as your own work. I think you're being a bit paranoid, Vanessa replied, her tone turning cold. No, everything is about you. I'm allowed to have my own ideas and share them with our manager. If you're feeling insecure about your own work, that's something you need to deal with. The casual gaslighting in her response, the way she made me feel like I was being unreasonable and paranoid for pointing out that she had stolen my work, was the moment I finally started to see Vanessa clearly. I left that conversation shaking with anger and hurt, and for the first time I started to question everything about our friendship. I started to think about all the times she had borrowed money and never paid it back, all the times she had presented my ideas as her own, all the ways she had subtly undermined me while claiming to be supportive. That night, I called my older sister, Emma, who I was close with and who had met Vanessa a few times. I explained what had happened with the product strategy and asked her opinion. Nina, I'm going to be honest with you, Emma said carefully. I've never trusted Vanessa. From the first time I met her, something felt off. The way she talks about you when you're not in the room, the way she positions herself as your protector while also subtly putting you down. I've been worried about this friendship for a while. What do you mean, the way she talks about me? I asked. She makes comments that sound supportive but are actually kind of mean, Emma explained. Like she'll say Nina works so hard, sometimes I worry she doesn't have a life outside work. Or Nina is so trusting, I have to look out for her because she doesn't always see when people are taking advantage of her. It comes across as concern, but it's actually painting you as someone who needs her guidance and protection. Hearing my sister articulate what Vanessa had been doing made me realize that I had been blind to a pattern of manipulation that had been going on for years. Vanessa wasn't my friend. She was someone who had identified me as useful, someone trusting and generous who she could exploit for money, for ideas, for status, and for social positioning. That was the moment I decided I was done being manipulated. I was done lending money that would never be repaid. I was done sharing ideas that would be stolen, and I was done trusting someone who had been betraying me while smiling to my face. But I also knew that simply cutting ties with Vanessa wouldn't be enough. She had damaged my reputation at work, she had stolen my work, and she had positioned herself for career advancement based on my ideas and my trust. I needed to expose what she had been doing, not just end the friendship. Over the next few weeks, I started paying closer attention to Vanessa's behavior and quietly documenting everything. I saved text messages where she asked to borrow money and promised to pay it back. I documented dates and amounts of loans that were never repaid. I started keeping detailed notes of conversations where I shared ideas that Vanessa later presented as her own. I also started talking to other colleagues, carefully and indirectly, to understand how they perceive me and whether Vanessa had been spreading rumors. What I discovered was worse than I had imagined. Multiple colleagues believed I was jealous of Vanessa, difficult to work with, and had unresolved issues from my breakup with Justin. They believed I complained constantly about the company, that I was unprofessional in meetings, and that I had poor judgment. None of this was true, but Vanessa had convinced people it was true by sharing carefully crafted lies mixed with enough truth to make them believable. I felt sick discovering how thoroughly Vanessa had poisoned people's perception of me, but I also felt determined to fix it. I wasn't going to let her destroy my career and my reputation without fighting back. The situation escalated dramatically about 7 months ago when something happened that showed me just how malicious Vanessa really was. I had shared some personal photos with Vanessa through text messages, including photos from a vacation I had taken and some casual selfies. These were normal friend photos, nothing inappropriate, but they were personal, and I had only shared them with people I trusted. I also had confided in Vanessa about some difficult things happening in my personal life, including some family issues and some insecurities I was dealing with. These were intimate conversations that I thought were private between best friends. Then I started hearing from colleagues that they had seen photos of me and had heard stories about my personal life. When I asked where they had gotten this information, The answers were vague but concerning. Someone had been sharing my photos and my private information, making me look foolish and unstable. It took me about a week to confirm that Vanessa was the source. She had been using our company's messaging system to share my photos with colleagues, accompanied by mocking commentary about my appearance, my life, and my personality. She had been sharing details about my family problems and my insecurities, framing them as reasons people should feel sorry for me or should understand why I was difficult. This wasn't just stealing ideas or damaging my professional reputation. This was deliberate cruelty, using my trust and my private information to humiliate me and entertain our colleagues at my expense. When I discovered this, I felt violated and furious in ways I had never experienced. Vanessa had pretended to be my closest friend, while actively working to destroy me. She had used every vulnerability I had shared, every confidence I had given her, as ammunition to hurt me and build her own social status. That was the moment I decided I wasn't just going to document Vanessa's behavior. I was going to destroy her career the way she had tried to destroy mine. But I knew I had to be strategic and careful. Vanessa was charming and well-liked. She had positioned herself as the victim of my supposed jealousy and instability. If I went after her directly without overwhelming evidence, people would just see it as confirmation that I was the problematic one. So I developed a plan. I was going to document everything comprehensively, involve HR and legal counsel where appropriate, and expose Vanessa's behavior in a way that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. The first thing I did was reach out to an employment attorney named Sarah Kim, who specialized in workplace harassment and hostile work environment cases. I explained my situation. A coworker who had been systematically damaging my reputation, stealing my work, and using company systems to share my private photos and information. Sarah listened carefully and then gave me her assessment. What you're describing sounds like workplace harassment, potential theft of intellectual property, and misuse of company resources, she said. The fact that Vanessa has been using company messaging systems to share your private photos is particularly serious. That's a clear violation of most companies' acceptable use policies and could potentially constitute harassment. What should I do? I asked. First, document everything, Sarah advised. Save every text message, every email, every piece of evidence showing money she borrowed and didn't repay, every instance where she stole your ideas. If you can get screenshots of the messages where she shared your photos through company systems, that would be crucial. Second, we're going to prepare a formal complaint to your HR department outlining the pattern of harassment and misuse of company resources. And third, we're going to make sure you're protected from retaliation. Over the next several weeks, I became obsessed with documentation. I created a comprehensive timeline of my friendship with Vanessa, including every loan I had given her with dates and amounts, totaling $4,200. I had text messages where she asked for money and promised to pay it back, and I had bank records showing the transfers I had made to her account. A detailed log of instances where I had shared ideas with Vanessa that she later presented as her own, including dates of our conversations and dates of her presentations to management. For some of these, I had email chains or meeting notes that proved I had developed the concepts before she presented them. Documentation of the rumors Vanessa had spread, compiled through careful conversations with colleagues who confirmed what they had been told and who had told them. Evidence of Vanessa using company messaging systems to share my private photos and personal information. This was the hardest to obtain, but I managed to get screenshots from a sympathetic colleague who had been uncomfortable with Vanessa's behavior and had saved the messages. A record of how Vanessa had pursued and started dating Justin, including text messages between Justin and me where he mentioned things Vanessa had told him about me during our relationship. Justin, to his credit, had started to realize that Vanessa had manipulated both of us, and he was willing to provide information about what she had said. The evidence I compiled was extensive and damning. It showed a clear pattern over 3 years of manipulation, theft, harassment, and deliberate efforts to damage my professional and personal reputation. While I was gathering evidence, I also had to continue working with Vanessa and pretending that our friendship was intact. This was one of the hardest things I've ever done. I had to sit across from her at lunch, listen to her talk about her life and her relationship with Justin, and act like I didn't know she had been destroying me behind my back. But I did it because I knew that if Vanessa suspected I was building a case against her, she would try to do damage control or retaliate in ways that could hurt me further. I needed her to feel secure and unsuspecting until I was ready to present everything to HR. During this time, Vanessa continued her pattern of behavior. She continued asking me about my work and then using that information for her own benefit. She continued making subtle comments that undermined me with colleagues. And she continued using company messaging to share information about me with others. But now I was documenting all of it, every conversation, every incident, every piece of evidence that showed what she was really doing. About 2 months after I started working with Sarah, we had compiled enough evidence to move forward. Sarah helped me prepare a formal complaint to HR that outlined everything Vanessa had done, supported by extensive documentation. The complaint focused on 3 main areas: workplace harassment through spreading false rumors and sharing my private photos and information via company messaging systems; theft of intellectual property by taking credit for my work and presenting my ideas as her own; creation of a hostile work environment through systematic efforts to damage my reputation and relationships with colleagues. For each allegation, we provided specific examples with dates, documentation, and corroborating evidence. The complaint was thorough, professional, and impossible to dismiss as personal drama or misunderstanding. I submitted the complaint to Diane Martinez, TechVision's head of HR, on a Monday morning. Diane was known for taking workplace issues seriously, and I was hopeful that she would investigate properly, rather than just trying to smooth things over. Diane called me into her office that afternoon. "Nina, I've reviewed your complaint and the documentation you provided," she said, her expression serious. "These are serious allegations, and I want you to know we're going to investigate them thoroughly. I need to ask you some questions about specific incidents." Over the next hour, Diane asked detailed questions about my relationship with Vanessa, about specific instances of her taking credit for my work, and about the private photos and information she had shared through company systems. "Do you have the actual screenshots of the company messages where Vanessa shared your photos?" Diane asked. I pulled out my phone and showed her the screenshots that my colleague had provided. They showed messages in TechVision's internal communication system, where Vanessa had shared photos of me along with mocking commentary and personal information I had shared with her in confidence. Diane's expression grew increasingly serious as she reviewed the screenshots. "This is a clear violation of our acceptable use policy," she said. "Company communication systems are not to be used for harassment or for sharing private information about colleagues. This is serious, Nina." "I know," I replied. "And this isn't isolated. Vanessa has been doing this kind of thing for 3 years, systematically undermining me while pretending to be my best friend." "I'm going to need to investigate this fully," Diane said. "That means interviewing Vanessa, talking to other employees who may have witnessed relevant behavior, and reviewing company communication records. During this investigation, I'm going to ask that you and Vanessa minimize contact with each other as much as possible." "Can you do that?" "Yes," I said. "I've been trying to maintain distance anyway." "Good," Diane replied. "And Nina, I want to be clear about something. If your allegations are substantiated, this is the kind of behavior that could result in termination. We take harassment and misuse of company resources very seriously. But I also need you to understand that Vanessa will be given an opportunity to respond to these allegations and present her side of the story." I understood that was fair, even though part of me wanted to see immediate consequences for Vanessa. But I had confidence in the evidence I had provided. It was comprehensive and undeniable. Over the next 2 weeks, Diane conducted her investigation. She interviewed multiple colleagues about the rumors they had heard and who had shared them. She reviewed company communication records and found additional examples of Vanessa using internal messaging to share private information about me. She interviewed Justin, who confirmed that Vanessa had said negative things about me during our relationship and had pursued him while we were still together. She also interviewed Vanessa, who apparently denied everything and claimed that I was making false accusations because I was jealous of her success and her relationship with Justin. But the evidence was too strong for Vanessa's denials to be credible. The screenshots of company messages were undeniable. The pattern of idea theft was documented. The loans that were never repaid were verified through bank records. And multiple colleagues confirmed that Vanessa had been the source of rumors about me. During the investigation, I noticed that Vanessa's behavior toward me changed. She went from friendly and supportive to cold and hostile. She stopped trying to maintain the pretense of friendship and started giving me angry looks in meetings and avoiding me in the office. I suspected she knew she was in serious trouble and was panicking. But by then, it was too late. The evidence was with HR, the investigation was underway, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. About 2.5 weeks after I filed my complaint, Diane called me into her office again. This time, she was joined by Kevin Phillips, TechVision's general counsel. "Nina, we've completed our investigation," Diane began. "We've substantiated your allegations. Vanessa did use company messaging systems to share your private photos and personal information in violation of our acceptable use policy. She did spread false information about you to colleagues in what we consider to be harassment. And we found multiple instances where she presented work that originated with you as her own ideas." I felt a surge of vindication hearing this formal confirmation of what I had known but hadn't been able to prove until now. "What happens now?" I asked. Kevin spoke up. "Vanessa's employment with TechVision is being terminated effective immediately. The misuse of company communication systems alone is grounds for termination under our policies. Combined with the harassment and the intellectual property issues, there's no question that termination is appropriate. Additionally," Diane continued, "we're going to be addressing the damage to your reputation within the company. We'll be communicating to relevant teams that an investigation found your colleague engaged in harassment and spread false information about you. We won't disclose all the details, but we want to make clear that the negative perceptions some people had of you were based on false information. We're also prepared to discuss compensation for the harassment you experienced," Kevin added. "That's something we can work out separately." I felt overwhelmed with relief and vindication. After 3 years of being manipulated, undermined, and betrayed, Vanessa was finally facing real consequences. "When will Vanessa be told?" I asked. "We're meeting with her this afternoon," Diane replied. "Would you like to be present for that meeting, or would you prefer we handle it without you?" I thought about it. Part of me wanted to see Vanessa's face when she was fired, but another part of me just wanted this whole situation to be over. I don't need to be there, I decided. I just want this resolved. But as it turned out, I ended up witnessing the meeting anyway, though not intentionally. That afternoon, I was working in a conference room near Diane's office when I heard raised voices. Vanessa was apparently not taking the news of her termination well. I couldn't hear the full conversation, but I heard enough to understand that Vanessa was denying everything, claiming she was being framed and accusing me of manipulating the situation because I was jealous and vindictive. "This is about Nina being obsessed with me," I heard Vanessa say loudly. "She's jealous of my relationship with Justin, jealous of my success here, and this is her way of trying to destroy me." But her protestations didn't matter. The evidence was too strong, and the decision had been made. About 30 minutes later, Vanessa emerged from Diane's office, her face red and tear-stained, carrying a box with her personal belongings. Security was escorting her out of the building. As she passed the conference room where I was working, she saw me through the glass. Our eyes met for just a moment, and I saw pure hatred in her expression. She mouthed something at me that looked like, "This isn't over," but security hurried her along before she could stop. I felt a complicated mix of emotions watching her leave. Relief that she was finally facing consequences. Vindication that my evidence had been believed and acted upon, but also sadness that someone I had trusted so completely had turned out to be so malicious. After Vanessa left the building, Diane came to find me. I wanted you to know that Vanessa has been escorted out, she said. Her termination is final, but I also want to warn you that she was pretty angry, and we're concerned she might try to retaliate in some way. If she contacts you or if you feel unsafe at any point, please let us know immediately. Thank you, I said. I appreciate you taking this seriously. We should have identified this behavior sooner, Diane replied. The fact that Vanessa was able to harass you for 3 years without it being caught is something we need to address in our workplace culture. But at least now it's been stopped. The immediate aftermath of Vanessa's termination was intense. Word spread quickly through the office that she had been fired, and people were curious about why. HR sent out a vague communication about an employee being terminated for maybe policy violations, but of course people wanted more details. Some of Vanessa's close friends at the company reached out to me, either to express sympathy or to subtly try to find out what had happened. I kept my responses professional and vague, saying only that there had been workplace issues that HR had investigated and resolved. But Diane also followed through on her promise to address my reputation. She had conversations with key team members and managers explaining that false information had been spread about me and that I should be judged on my actual work and behavior rather than on rumors. The shift in how people treated me was gradual but noticeable. Colleagues who had been distant became friendlier. People started including me in social activities again. And most importantly, my work started being recognized and valued properly, rather than being dismissed or minimized. About a month after Vanessa was fired, Tom Davidson, our manager, called me into his office. "Nina, I owe you an apology," he said seriously. "I realize now that I was giving Vanessa credit for ideas and strategies that you had actually developed. She was very good at positioning herself as the innovative one, and I didn't look closely enough at where the ideas were actually coming from." "I appreciate you saying that," I replied. "More than that, I want to make it right," Tom continued. "We have a senior product manager position opening up, and I'd like to offer it to you. It comes with a significant salary increase to $110,000 and broader responsibilities. You've proven that you have the strategic thinking and leadership capabilities we need, and I want to make sure you're properly recognized and compensated." I was stunned. The promotion and salary increase represented not just professional advancement, but validation that my work was valued and that I was being judged on my actual capabilities rather than on Vanessa's lies. "I accept, I said. "Thank you for the opportunity." The promotion was announced the following week, and the response from colleagues was overwhelmingly positive. People congratulated me. Several mentioned they were glad to see my work finally being recognized, and my credibility within the company was restored and enhanced. But while my professional life was improving dramatically, the personal aftermath was more complicated. Justin reached out to me about 2 weeks after Vanessa was fired. We met for coffee, and he apologized for his role in the situation. "I should have seen what Vanessa was doing," he said. "She spent months telling me negative things about you while we were together, and I believed her because I trusted her. I didn't realize she was manipulating both of us." "Did you know she was sharing my private information with people at work?" I asked. "Not until recently," Justin replied. "But once I started paying attention, I saw how she talked about everyone behind their backs while pretending to be supportive to their faces. I broke up with her about a week ago. I can't be with someone who treats people that way." I felt sympathy for Justin. He had been manipulated by Vanessa too, just in different ways, but I also knew that our relationship was over and there was no going back. "I appreciate the apology," I told him, "but I think we both need to just move forward separately. What Vanessa did damaged a lot of things, and I need to focus on rebuilding my life and my career." Justin understood, and we parted amicably. It was closure on that chapter of my life. The aftermath for Vanessa was less pleasant. Through mutual connections, I learned that she was having serious trouble finding new employment. TechVision wouldn't provide a positive reference given the circumstances of her termination, and word had spread in Denver's tech community about why she had been fired. She apparently tried to tell People that she had been unfairly terminated, that I had made false accusations against her out of jealousy. But enough people knew the truth, or had access to people who knew the truth, that her version of events didn't gain traction. I also learned that she was facing financial difficulties. She had been living beyond her means for years, partially funded by money she borrowed from me and never repaid, and now without a job she was struggling. Part of me felt satisfied that she was facing consequences, but mostly I just felt relieved that she was out of my life. About 3 months after Vanessa's termination, I received an unexpected message from her. It was a long email where she apologized for what she had done, claimed she had been struggling with her own insecurities and had made terrible choices, and asked if we could talk. I read the email twice, trying to determine if the apology was genuine or if this was another manipulation. But ultimately, it didn't matter. Even if Vanessa was genuinely sorry, too much damage had been done. Our friendship, which had been based on lies and exploitation from her side, couldn't be salvaged. I didn't respond to the email. There was nothing left to say to Vanessa. She had spent 3 years systematically betraying me while pretending to be my best friend. She had stolen my money, my ideas, and my trust. She had tried to destroy my career and my reputation. An apology, even a genuine one, couldn't undo that damage or rebuild the trust she had so thoroughly violated. Instead, I focused on moving forward. My career was thriving in ways it never had when Vanessa was sabotaging me. I was building genuine friendships with colleagues who I could trust, and I was learning to set better boundaries and recognize red flags in relationships. My sister Emma became my closest confidant during this time. "I'm so proud of you for standing up for yourself," she told me during one of our weekly dinners. "It took real courage to document everything and go to HR. A lot of people would have just accepted the situation or quietly left the company." "I couldn't let her get away with it," I replied. "Not just for me, but because she would have done the same thing to other people." Vanessa was good at identifying trusting people and exploiting them. Someone had to stop her. 6 months after Vanessa's termination, I was thriving both professionally and personally. The promotion had opened up new opportunities, and I was working on exciting projects with teams that valued my contributions. I had also started building a social life outside of work, making friends through hobbies and activities rather than just through professional connections. But I also carried lessons from the experience with Vanessa. I was more cautious about who I trusted and more attentive to red flags in relationships. I didn't lend money to friends anymore without clear repayment terms. I was careful about sharing personal information until I was confident someone was trustworthy. And I was much better at recognizing when someone was subtly undermining me rather than genuinely supporting me. 1 year after filing the HR complaint that led to Vanessa's termination, I was invited to speak on a panel at a Women in Tech conference about workplace challenges and how to address them. During my remarks, I talked about my experience with Vanessa without naming her specifically. I spent 3 years in a friendship with someone who seemed supportive but was actually systematically sabotaging me, I told the audience. She borrowed money she never repaid, stole my ideas and presented them as her own, spread rumors about me, and used my trust to damage my professional reputation. And she did all of this while calling herself my best friend. I explained how I had documented the behavior, worked with legal counsel, and presented evidence to HR that resulted in her termination. The lesson I learned is that not everyone who smiles at you is a friend, I continued. Some people are very good at appearing supportive while actually working against you. The key is to pay attention to patterns rather than just words. Does this person's behavior over time match what they say? Are they building you up or subtly tearing you down? Are they trustworthy with sensitive information, or do they use it against you? I also talked about the importance of documentation and evidence when dealing with workplace harassment or manipulation. If someone is sabotaging you, document everything, I advised. Save messages, keep records, note dates and details, because if you do need to go to HR or take legal action, you'll need evidence. And don't wait until the situation becomes unbearable. Address it as soon as you recognize the pattern. The presentation resonated with many people in the audience, and afterward, several women approached me to share their own experiences with toxic friendships and workplace betrayal. One woman told me, "I have a colleague who I thought was my friend, but now I'm noticing some of the patterns you described. Your story gave me the courage to start setting boundaries and paying closer attention to her behavior." Trust your instinct, I told her. If something feels off, it probably is. Real friends support you consistently, not just when it's convenient for them. 2 years after Vanessa's termination, I had been promoted again, this time to Director of Product Strategy, with a salary of $145,000 in leadership responsibility for a team of 12 people. I had built a reputation as someone who was innovative, strategic, and ethical in how I worked with colleagues and managed teams. I had also recovered financially from the money Vanessa had stolen. The $4,200 she had borrowed and never repaid had been a significant amount at the time, but now I was in a much better financial position and had learned valuable lessons about lending money to friends. Through mutual connections, I occasionally heard updates about Vanessa. She had eventually found work at a smaller company outside of tech, apparently in a role that didn't involve close collaboration with colleagues. The damage to her reputation in Denver's tech community had been significant enough that she had essentially been forced to change industries. I felt no satisfaction in her struggles, but I also felt no guilt about the consequences she had faced. She had made deliberate choices to manipulate, betray, and harm me over 3 years. The termination and the damage to her reputation were natural consequences of her actions, not unjust punishment. What mattered more to me was what I had built in the aftermath. I had a career I was proud of, built on my actual work and capabilities rather than on stolen ideas. I had genuine friendships with people who supported me authentically rather than using me for their own benefit, and I had learned to value myself enough to set boundaries and refuse to accept mistreatment. 3 years after the HR complaint that changed everything, I reflected on how different my life was from when Vanessa had been my supposed best friend. Back then, I had been lending her money I couldn't afford to lose, having my ideas stolen, being undermined constantly, and watching my reputation destroyed by someone I trusted completely. Now, I was a director at a successful tech company, earning significantly more than I had before, working with teams that valued my contributions and building relationships based on genuine trust and mutual respect. The transformation hadn't been easy. There had been moments of doubt when I wondered if I was doing the right thing by going to HR. There had been anxiety about retaliation and concern about how the investigation would affect my own career. But ultimately, standing up for myself and refusing to accept Vanessa's manipulation had been the best decision I could have made. The biggest lesson I learned from the entire experience was about the difference between real friendship and toxic manipulation disguised as friendship. Real friends celebrate your successes without diminishing them. They support you without expecting something in return. They keep your confidences and protect your reputation rather than using your trust as ammunition to hurt you. Vanessa had done none of those things. She had taken everything I offered, friendship, trust, money, ideas, and had used it all to advance herself while systematically destroying me. She had been a parasite rather than a friend, extracting value from our relationship while giving nothing genuine in return. Recognizing that pattern and having the courage to expose it rather than just accepting it had changed my life, not just professionally, but in how I thought about relationships and how I valued myself. 4 years after Vanessa was fired, I was featured in a Denver business publications profile of rising leaders in the tech industry. The article detailed my career progression, my leadership philosophy, and my approach to building healthy team cultures. During the interview, the journalist asked about challenges I had overcome in my career. I thought about whether to mention Vanessa and decided that sharing the experience might help others recognize similar patterns in their own lives. Early in my career, I had a colleague who I thought was my best friend, but who was actually sabotaging me systematically, I said. She stole my ideas, borrowed money she never repaid, spread rumors about me, and used company systems to share my private information. It took me 3 years to recognize what was happening and to build the evidence needed to stop it. What advice would you give to others in similar situations? The journalist asked. Pay attention to patterns rather than just words, I replied. If someone says they support you but their actions consistently undermine you, believe the actions, not the words. Document everything, especially in workplace situations where you might need evidence. And don't be afraid to seek help from HR, legal counsel, or other professionals when you're dealing with harassment or manipulation. I also talked about the importance of setting boundaries and recognizing that not every relationship is worth salvaging. When I first realized what Vanessa was doing, part of me wanted to confront her and try to save the friendship, I explained. But some relationships are too toxic to fix, especially when the other person has shown through consistent behavior that they don't respect you. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to cut ties completely and focus on building better relationships with people who actually value you. The article generated significant attention, and I received messages from dozens of people sharing their own experiences with toxic friendships and workplace betrayal. Many thanked me for speaking publicly about the issue and for showing that it was possible to fight back against manipulation and win. One message particularly stood out. It was from a woman who worked at Tech Vision, someone I didn't know personally, but who had started after Vanessa left. I heard about what happened with you and a former employee, she wrote. I wanted you to know that the way you handled it has become part of the company culture here. People talk about how you stood up for yourself, documented the harassment, and got justice. It's made people more aware of workplace manipulation and more willing to report it when they see it. You didn't just save yourself, you probably saved a lot of other people who would have been Vanessa's next targets. Reading that message, I realized that exposing Vanessa's behavior had accomplished something bigger than just personal vindication. It had created awareness about manipulation tactics that were common but often invisible. It had shown people that toxic behavior could be stopped if you had evidence and were willing to fight back. And it had contributed to a workplace culture that valued honesty and integrity over charm and manipulation. That larger impact, that contribution to changing how people thought about workplace friendships and manipulation meant more to me than any career success or personal satisfaction. 5 years after the HR complaint that ended Vanessa's career at Tech Vision, I was exactly where I wanted to be professionally and personally. I was a successful director at a company I respected, earning a salary that reflected my actual value, working with people who appreciated my contributions, and building a life based on authentic relationships rather than toxic ones. The money Vanessa had stolen, the ideas she had taken credit for, the reputation damage she had caused, all of that had been repaired and surpassed. What she had tried to destroy, she had actually made stronger by forcing me to recognize my own worth and fight for it. Vanessa had thought she was clever, identifying me as someone trusting and generous who she could exploit for years. She had thought she could steal my work, my money, and my reputation while maintaining the facade of friendship. She had underestimated me, assuming I would continue accepting mistreatment indefinitely. Her underestimation was her biggest mistake, because once I recognized what she was doing and decided to fight back, I had the intelligence, the patience, and the determination to build a case that was impossible to deny. And I had the courage to expose her even when it felt risky and uncomfortable. The fake friend who tried to destroy me lost everything. Her job, her reputation, her ability to work in the industry, and eventually her relationship with Justin. Meanwhile, I thrived professionally, built genuine friendships, and created a life that was better than anything I had when Vanessa was pretending to be my friend. That's not just my story. That's a template for anyone dealing with toxic friendships and workplace manipulation. You can recognize the pattern, you can document the behavior, you can expose the manipulation, and you can come out stronger on the other side. If you're watching this and recognizing patterns from your own life, if you have a friend who borrows money they never repay, If someone takes credit for your ideas while claiming to support you, if you feel like you're being undermined by someone who pretends to care about you, I want you to know that you don't have to accept it. You have more power than you think. Document everything. Save messages, keep records, note dates and patterns. Pay attention to actions rather than just words. Seek help from HR, legal counsel, or other professionals when appropriate. And don't be afraid to cut ties with people who are using you rather than genuinely supporting you. Vanessa Cole thought she could destroy my career and my life while pretending to be my best friend. She spent 3 years stealing from me, lying about me, and trying to make me look unstable and problematic. She used my trust as a weapon against me and my vulnerabilities as entertainment for others. But her manipulation was exposed, her career was ended, and her reputation was destroyed. Not through violence or illegal retaliation, but through documentation, evidence, and working within proper channels to hold her accountable. The overlooked victim became the respected director, the fake friend became the fired manipulator, and the story that began with betrayal and exploitation ended with justice, vindication, and the lesson that not everyone who smiles at you is a friend. If this story resonated with you, please share it with someone who might be dealing with a toxic friendship or workplace manipulation. Drop a comment about your own experiences with fake friends or colleagues who pretended to support you while actually undermining you, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about recognizing manipulation, standing up for yourself, and building a life based on genuine relationships rather than toxic ones. Remember, real friends build you up consistently, not just to your face while tearing you down behind your back. Your instincts about people are usually right. Trust them, document everything, and don't be afraid to fight back when someone betrays you. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope it helps someone out there who's dealing with a manipulative friend, who's watching someone take credit for their work, or who's wondering if they're just being paranoid about someone's behavior. You're not paranoid. Trust your instincts, gather evidence, and stand up for yourself. It took time, it took courage, and it took strategic planning, but justice was served. And more importantly, I built a career and a life I can be proud of, based on my actual work and genuine relationships, rather than on being exploited by someone who pretended to be my friend while actively destroying me.